Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's webinar. This is the Northeast Monitor Farm summer meeting. Unfortunately, not quite as we would have hoped. I'm sure you've heard it 50 times over, but due to the current climate, we are all transferring onto a digital platform. If nothing else, I think it's something really quite worthwhile writing on your CV, and we've certainly learnt a lot throughout this time. So just quickly to start with, we will go through the housekeeping as always. All your microphones are on mute and your cameras are turned off. So as many faces as you'd like to pull at us all, we can't see you. Having said that though, the session is being recorded and is available on the AHDB YouTube site. So if you want to listen to it again, or if there's anything you missed that you need to pick up, then please just head over there and have a look. On the right hand side in your toolbox or bar, there is a chat function. So throughout this session, if you would like to ask any questions, please just type them in there. Likewise, if you're having any problems, type them in there. Christian, who is in the background and probably a godsend to all webinars, will pick them up and help you with any problems. So this webinar this evening, it's going to last about an hour. There's lots to get through, but we'll round up approximately 8 o'clock. And like always, you know, follow us on Twitter. We're all on there. There's lots going on, and hashtag Monitor Farm if you want to see what's specifically going on with the Farm Excellence Programme. So we do have basis and Naroso points available. I was led to believe that the Naroso team were furloughed, but they are back at work. So there's 2 basis points, 2 and 1 Naroso point. If you put your details, as they say on the slide, in the chat box on the right hand side again, we will pick those up and add your details to the sheet. So yeah, right hand side chat box, put your details in there and we'll sign you up for your points. So the plan of action for this evening, it's really nice actually to be sat around the table, even if it is in this format, with Gary, John and our new host, Pip, who's going to tell you all about himself further on through the presentation. It's lovely to see you all. I really do miss the interaction that you get through the Monitor Farm programme, but like I say, we will have to make the most of this evening. So tonight we're focusing on the Northeast. It's a regional webinar and we've now got quite a good spread really. Gary at the south end of the region, through to John and Pip, who's at the very top just before you creep into Scotland. So between our 3 wonderful hosts and speakers, we'll find out what's going on. We'll try and imagine what their farms are looking like and what sort of winters they've had. And then Emily Pope is going to join us later on and just chat through what the strategic farms are up to, and possible on-farm tryouts that you can have a look at on farm. So before we get kicked off, I thought we'd attempt something interactive, a very topical subject, oilseed rape. I won't lie, I'm fighting its cause. I still think there's nothing else to beat it as a break crop in the rotation, but I am willing to be proven wrong. There's lots of work going on as to try and aid this crop, but hopefully Christian will pop up with a poll now. We've just got a few questions to ask you about what you're doing with your oilseed rape going forwards and what you think about it. So, what percentage of the sown winter oilseed rape area will you harvest this time? You've got 5 options there: 0%, 1 to 50, 51 to 75, and 76 to 100, or non-sown. I will be interested to see how this compares with the southerners as well. But if you have a quick look at that, I'll give you a few seconds. What percentage of the sown winter oilseed rape area will you harvest this time? Oh. So of that, a few quick results. I mean, Gary, John and Pip, as you're going through your presentations, feel free to comment on what you think. But 76 to 100% of you are combining 50%. 51 to 75% will be 20% of you. They're fairly equal, are these bottom ones. 1 to 50%, 14% of you, and non-sown 14% of you. So quite varied. Moving on to the second question. What percentage of the sown spring oilseed rape area will you harvest? So same percentage results again if you click one of those boxes, but what percentage of the spring oilseed rape area will you harvest if you've drilled any? %90 non-sown. Interesting. Not the easiest, I don't think, is spring oilseed rape. And then the next one, Christian. Will you grow rape in 2021? Yes or no? Will you grow rape in 2021? Yes, 87% of you. Emily, write this down. I think it's still worth us looking at oilseed rape and supporting how to grow it better. And then have we got one last question, I think? If you are going to grow rape, oh, sorry, thank you, Christian. If you are going to grow rape, what area compared to 2020? So so if you read through those, if you're going to grow rape, what area compared with the two this time? So what are you going to drill for the 2020-2021 harvest? More than a 10% increase in area, 1 to 10% increase in area, the same again, 1 to 10% decrease in area, or more than a 10% decrease in area. Very mixed bag there then. 32% of you going to grow the same again, that's positive. Just short of 40% are decreasing the area by 10%, but there's still nearly 20% of you going to increase the area by 20%. So some positive results to be had out of there, and I think certainly going forwards, it's going to carry on being a huge conversation. So moving swiftly on then, I'm going to hand over to John Aynsley. John's our Saltburn Monitor Farmer. I'm sure a lot of you will know him or recognise him. And he's concluding 3 years as a monitor farm host, of which his objective at the beginning was very clear about what he wanted to get out of the programme. So John, over to you.
Thank you, Rose, and good evening, everyone. It's my 3 years is obviously concluding, as Rose has mentioned, and it's gone very quickly indeed. And I suppose the question is, have we been successful and achieved the objectives that we set out to do? Before I go to that, I'll just give you a little bit of background on where we are today with cropping and one thing and another. We have about 500 odd acres, 540 acres of winter wheat in, which currently looks pretty good actually. We got it all in good time last back end. The winter barley, 400 odd acres of that it's probably okay, but it won't break any of the right sort of records. And the rape, probably like a lot of people's, is all over the place. There's some good bits, there's some bad bits, and some non-existent bits. The spring barley is probably looking a bit better than it deserves to, considering all the dry weather we had. And the spring beans have done remarkably well under the same circumstances. So that wraps us up with about 1,600 acres of arable cropping at the moment. We have about 1,500 acres of grass that's carrying 450 to 500 stabilizer cows and calves, about 80 bulling heifers, about 1,000 ewes and 300 gimmers. And we have another 430 acres of moorland and bits of land that's in all sorts of different HLS type schemes. So really, when I came down here about 9 years ago and took over the running of the estate, the arable side was virtually all in wheat. And that year in 2011, the yields for us here were very poor. And when we started looking at the soils to understand that, they were very anaerobic. There was no life in them whatsoever. You put a spade in the ground, you could hardly find a worm, and they just didn't smell right. So things obviously had to change. And really, you sat there scratching your head and you're thinking a bit, how the heck am I going to do this? And I suppose the catalyst for me for that was meeting Steve Townsend, who we use now as a soil guy. And we've had loads of meetings and discussions about what approach we take to improving the soil, because that is the key thing really, for me anyway. And at about the same time, we started with the AHDB, the benchmarking groups, and that's actually been a huge help in understanding your costs and where we wanted to go. And then we moved on to being a monitor farm really in 2017. So at the start of this, our aims and objectives was, one, to improve the soil from where it was. Two, we have in certain areas of the estate quite a large infestation of sterile brome. We don't really have a lot of black grass. We have got the odd little bit, but we kind of take a zero tolerance approach and put it back to grass. And then to look at different rotations to see whether we could be more profitable, whether it was going to have an impact on the brome, and all sorts of different things like that. And I wanted to find out whether we could make direct drilling work, because when I arrived, they were using a min-till system, but it was going down to 10, 12 inches. Well, for me, that's deeper than plowing in some cases. It seemed to be not right. So we came out to 4 inches min-till with a Horsch Terrano, and then using a disc drill over that. And it makes a very good job. It is very good. But the next stage to that is direct drilling. So, and it's a fairly big step if you've never done it before. So that was part of the plan to see whether we can make that work. And above all else, actually, can we do all those things and remain profitable? Because without the profit, you can't do a thing. So as a monitor farm, we have to have a steering group, and that's made up of 5 people plus myself. So you need 5 very good people that bring different things to the party and are strong enough, because they actually monitor and organize the agenda over that 3-year period on that ground. And I think we've been quite good with that. We've had some extremely forthright meetings and one thing and another. So to the project itself, we committed 260 acres to the project, which was on some of our poorer, wetter ground that had been in continuous wheat. And I thought, well, if we can make everything work on that, then we'll be able to do it quite well over the rest of the arable side on the estate. So to that end, we bought a second-hand Horsch CO6 drill and fitted that with the Metcalf tines and the tubes on that for the direct drilling element. And then in the first year, we introduced cover crops and winter beans into that. And winter beans has been quite the revelation for us down here anyway. So I suppose you've got to ask yourself, well, have we met our objectives? You know, 3 years later, which is a very short spell of time, especially when you look at the weather and the harvest over the last 3 years. So we have improved the soil, I'm quite sure about that, but it's still work in progress. We have a better understanding now of what we need to do through quite a lot of soil sampling and understanding for us that calcium magnesium balance, because we're very high magnesium soils, and it's like trying to work with wet plasticine. It just doesn't break up at all. So that soil has become much more friable. It's much better in the top 2, 3, 4 inches than ever it was, because we're working away getting that balance between the calcium magnesium right. The other thing that we do that we've learned is actually we drill early, which is against a lot of agronomists' advice, etc. And we keep the seed rates higher than would be advised generally. And if we get that in and we get that root mass into the ground, which is really beneficial to the soils that we have down here. And it helps that filtration. We don't have as much water lying around as we used to. Although I have to say, this last year, in October and November, that really did test things out. And the other thing is, it's a case of stop doing the things that are the wrong things to do. And for us, that was probably being in the fields when you shouldn't be in. So we take the view now, if the soil starts sticking to the wheels, get out the field, because you're doing far more harm than good. And that's a tough discipline, actually, in many cases when you first start. So to the sterile brome, which was the next sort of objective. Have we conquered that? Well, probably not in full, but we're getting on top of it. We're understanding what we need to do to manage that and sort of keep a lid on it in many respects. And that's having used cover crops, winter beans, and Roundup. Let's not beat about the bush. You can't really control it without that. We can now go back to a slightly different rotation, but if we need to, we'll come back to cover crops, spring barley, beans, and everything where we can get a handle on that. So I'm quite comfortable that we can do that. The rotations, we've tried different things, but on that 260-acre block of land that was in continuous wheat and did have a brome problem, we went to cover crops, into spring barley, into winter beans, and then following that with wheat. On the rest of the estate, we were using a 3-crop rotation, which was winter barley, oilseed rape, and first wheats, min-tilled, and that's done well. The direct drilling on the Monitor Farm bit has worked well as well. There's very little, no difference in fact, I would say, in yield on your first wheats. The only difference is when you look at it, you're going from the disc drill that drills at sort of 6-inch rows up to the direct drill, which you can see in the slide in front of you. The slide on the right with the pronto drill, it's sort of 5-6 inches, and then you've got your 10-inch rows. But when you go down there and you count the heads per meter, there's no difference at all. So it'd be interesting going forward whether there's trial work done on the wider rows, extensive trial work, to see if there's any yield difference in that. But there's one thing for sure, the direct drilling works, and I think it's to change over, it's a mindset thing. And if you haven't got the mindset to want to do it, it probably won't work. But in reality, it does. I'm quite sure about that. And that in itself saves a lot of fixed costs, which I know from benchmarking is the fixed costs are the hard ones to control. Your sort of machinery costs, fuel, labor, etc., that comes back, that sort of get a bit hidden in many different ways. And I suppose really at the end of the day, it comes back to profitability. Well, that's always going to be work in progress, but yes, we managed to do that. And on our winter meetings that we have, usually the first meeting is a farm walk going around in October, November, whenever that might be, looking at the crops and the establishment, having a good look, and then going back and looking at the gross margins that we've had. And 2 years ago, miserable sort of wet harvest things weren't particularly good. Last year, they were pretty good, and things are looking good for this year as well. So yeah, I don't know what's going to happen with Brexit, the new agricultural policy, and goodness knows what else, but profitability will always be a challenge. The winter meetings that we've had over the last 3 years we've had some marvelous speakers and on some excellent topics as well. And I think that for me, there's 2 or 3 that would stand out. We had habitat creation and management and pollinators, which I found fascinating. A chap called Marek Nowakowski, who, yeah, worth listening to if you get the chance. And then we had a grain marketing analyst, Cecilia Payne from Openfield, who gave us a really good meeting on sort of world markets and how we fit into that sort of pre and post Brexit and one thing and another. So yeah, from that point of view, the things worked well. But 3 years to judge anything, you can't really judge it over 3 years, I don't think. It's work in progress. Are we going the right way? I feel that we are, and I feel that the soils are improving. We're getting a handle on our costs better, etc. And I think we are on the right road. And I'd just like to thank the people on our steering committee and all the people that's come to the meetings over the last 3 years, because they've been a valuable input and source of information, and it's been great. So I'd like to say thank you to everybody that's been on the farm and at our meetings, and to the AHDB as well, both on the Monitor Farm side and the benchmarking group. Thank you. Rose, back to you.
Make sure I press the right buttons. John, thank you very much for that. Just a couple of questions. You know, like I say, everybody, if you pop questions in the box on the right hand side. But before we move on, I think fitting moment. The direct drilling system. What do you do with your straw?
Well, it's not well. The straw we bale what we need, because we need about 6,000 bales for the cattle and sheep. And all that goes back into muck, back onto the land. And what we don't need, what we don't bale, that goes through the chopper. And we target the muck onto the worst, toughest parts of the estate, but it all goes around. I mean, obviously, you can never put the muck back over the same area that the straw came off. So it is a targeted approach in that respect. The direct drills play with it. They just go straight through the muck, straight through the straw. It isn't a problem. It really isn't.
And then
that's a timed direct drill, mind. I can't speak for a disked one, but we use a timed one, and it goes through that no problem.
Brilliant. And then just quickly a second question. Thinking about potatoes and muck, etc. Can you ever plough in the rotation?
Well, I wouldn't want to go back to ploughing now. We see the benefits of the system that we're using. We don't subsoil either. It's about getting that root mass in and letting Mother Nature do her work. If you allow Mother Nature to do her work, she'll do it a heck of a lot faster than you think she will, and a lot cheaper as well.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, John. So a few more questions coming in, but we'll see you at the end. Right, Gary, you are up next. So just while you get your camera switched on and microphone unmuted, Gary and I actually both joined the AHDB together. So last spring, when I took the position as KEM for the region, Gary also joined the team as the Huggate Monitor Farmer. So not a million miles away from a previous monitor farmer at Driffield. Gary set his stall out. So without further ado, I'll pass over to you. If you, I think, going to chat a little bit about what you've done over the last year and found from the winter meetings.
Yeah, well, thank you, Rose. Hello, everyone. Yeah, well, to follow John, I don't know how I can do that, really. He's very comprehensive. Very good. So, yeah, this year we've had a fair few meetings. Sad not to show people around again, because it was by far my favourite. So if you could just go on to the next slide, please, Rose. Yeah, so yeah, obviously we have the dreaded blackgrass here. Still not as bad as what other people have. Sorry, that's wrong. I shouldn't say it like that. It's not a terrible problem here. Everything's rogable. We have a zero tolerance. It's desiccated before it goes through the combine, and then strimmed as well. We'll try and get it twice if we can. Just actually underneath that blackgrass fertile, there's just a headland we sprayed with. We went around all our wheats with a brome spray, just a 6 metre margin around each one, and yeah, it hit it hard this time. Thankfully, that rain came. I think we got 30 mil late March. I think it just seemed to bring it all back on, and yeah, it recovered it really, or without looking disgraceful. The other two photos are actually some extays we've got in the ground. I don't think you can see sort of on the bottom photo. There's actually a lot of secondary regrowth in there. I think that's just telling of the time this year. We're actually drilling this year. We were drilled up fairly early. I think drills parked up at around the 6th of October, which was handy, and that was after some potato land. Yeah, in rotation, we've got standard wheat, rape, wheat, second wheat, vining peas, spring barley, and then we've just introduced some potatoes for now. Anyway, we're just sort of assessing what damage that's actually doing to the soil. I think everybody's moving more towards improving your soils and looking after them, and whether or not actually does the rent check from the potatoes benefit more than what actual damage you're doing to the soil is still been in a question, really. The reason we've got introduced potatoes is actually we're struggling with the peas. We've grown peas on this farm for well over 50 years. I believe that they had a static viner here in the 50s. So yeah, we're struggling with peas. That's really why we introduced cover crops as well. But yeah, I'll discuss that further on later down the line on this chat. You can go on to the next one, please, Rose. Yeah, so this is our rape. This is taken in spring. On the right hand side, top side of that tram line there's Aurelia. Bottom side there's some Old Faithful extrovert, which for some reason they're doing away with. For the life of me, I can't understand why. It's been our best deal for a long time. It's maybe a bit slower in the autumn, but in good autumn years, you don't really want aggressively growing unless you're combating flea beetle. I actually took this photo because I thought that pigeons were going after the Aurelia more, and you could see this distinct line, but actually when it came to flowering, the extrovert was further in front. So I actually think now that the Aurelia is just further behind. But yeah, as you can see, it's a decent crop there. And going back to your pearls, we'll combine 100% of our rape. We're actually going to grow a little bit more next year. That's only due to rotational reasons, really, more than anything. But yeah, we actually found that the dreaded flea beetle was less of an impact this year than it was previous year. Yeah, I went through it a few times last year rather than lots of times the year before. Yeah, next slide then, please, Rose. Yeah, so this year our big investment was a pig shed. Yeah, just organic matter soils, try and improve them, trying to get the beasties back in the soil, feed them, get the nutrients to where they want it, and less out of the bag, and all the hot topics of nowadays. I don't think I'm doing out fresh. I don't think we're going, if anything, it's a backward step, going back to the way it was done before. So yeah, we're just Boreal man turned up this week, so I thought I'd have a photo of that. It's just a few months late, but we can stand that. So yeah, very good system. Pigs do very well. They came in on the 25th of March. First lot were going out this week. Well, sorry, no, sheds are empty this week. So yeah, they've done pretty well. Clean shed obviously benefits, but these gale breakers, you can just see them just on the bottom photo there. They're ideal. These are the best pig sheds I've been in. They're breezy, they're clean, yeah, pigs just do well on them. They're on meal grub, and yeah, they do very well. And the bottom right photo there, that's actually our muck shed. A lot of people walk, there's a footpath near there, a lot of people walk past them, what the hell are you doing, wasting such a good shed on putting muck in? Well, I think it's a bit difficult to say, really, because with it being so dry, we haven't really seen the benefit too much. But I think in the future, that's the way to go. I think we're just future-proofing more than anything. So yeah, pigs, steady income and organic matter. That's the reason for them, little grunters. Yeah, skip on another, please, Rose. Yeah, so we have the dreaded stabilizers as well. Yeah, mainly for grazing our dales. They're all in higher tier. Before I came, Alec had continental stock cattle. The dales were just going backwards, really. There wasn't any decent grass. He had to buy such big cattle to graze them, and nobody wanted big cattle. So we decided to go down the stabilizer route for easy calving and all the other benefits, good mothers, calm cattle as well. Obviously, all the dales are open countryside, so we really have to watch walkers. That calf suckling was suckling after 10 minutes. I think that sort of says it all. And just the heifers in the bottom photo there, they're sort of nice, even batch. They're sort of calved over 3 months. 3 months. 9 weeks. 9 weeks. 9 weeks. Yeah, there's that 3. Not quite 3 months, is it? But yeah, mixed farming yet again. Whether or not we increase the herd size, go on to layers, is for future discussion. I know Alec's favourite saying to me is, show me a grass crop that'll give the same gross margin as a wheat and you can have more grass. Unfortunately, I don't think it quite works like that, and we'll see how it goes. We'll hold bated breath, shall we say. Next slide, please, Rose. So yeah, our winter meetings on year 1, we had a soils and cover crops meeting where we had Anne Bogle come up, and she did one of those scorecards for soils, and yeah, it was interesting. We actually found we had more well, I was shocked at how much organic matter was in the soils, considering we've been putting bagged on for such a long time. Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. The only thing I found was, the only worry was there's more surface compaction on the cover crops, which I couldn't quite get my head around, where I presume it was just the drilling process. So we direct drilled it with an Italian drill from just down the road. It did a good job, but we still want a multi-purpose drill. We still do plough, I'd say 50% of our cereals, and then we trio the rest, really. So we need something that's going to do both at the minute, and that's, you know, we tried a tine drill from Horsh as well. Unfortunately, they didn't come and help us set up for doing the wheat, and they didn't come out very nice, so it sort of put us off that a little bit. But it's certainly something I'd like to try again in the future. But yeah, so soil and cover crops. Cover crops, we started with cover crops to help with foot rot in peas. We put a defender radish in, which is bifumigant, so top it, then plough it under quick and let the gases do the job. Did that for about 3 years, and actually PGRO have just done some trials, and their results show that it's actually detrimental. So I think you just have to take every bit of research with a pinch of salt, and remember who's trying to sell you things. So we've actually, this year's cover crop, we've taken the defender radish out, and we've got Phacelia and Onert in there to try and just see. Hopefully, we're also involved in a Yorkshire water scheme. It's called the Humber Landscape Pilot. They're trialing cover crops to try and help hold in nitrogen and other aspects to stop it going in the drinking water. I think there's a fair few water companies that are going down this route now, and we're quite pleased to be involved in it. So the labour and machinery review, we're looking at sort of focusing on buying a new combine, whether it is worth it. We had someone from Brown & Co come, Mr. Rob Meadley come. He went into detail. He took all our kit on the farm, what hours we used to establish crops, how much we used it, diesel, everything, absolutely everything, down to any bit of kit we have parked in the bushes, and did a review, found out when our busiest time was, which was pretty self-explanatory. It was harvest time, believe it or not. The cows actually offset that a bit more, and this is prior to having the pigs. Although we've got an extra pig man now, the work through the pigs actually decreases our labour curve. So we'll hopefully we'll see how that goes. Yeah, all right, Rez, I'll hurry up. Yeah, we got yen. Yeah, I actually missed yen. That's one tip for Pip. Don't book your holidays when yen's on. When your meetings are on. I struggled with that. Then we had personal resilience. Actually, that was our least attended meeting, but I actually got the most out of that. It was all about what happens when somebody's not there. Who can sort your thing out, do all your work for you when you're away. So that's if you get a chance to go to one of them meetings, go. On my first meeting as well, I was challenged to some challenges, I guess. David Blacker sent me to drill 25% of our winter wheat with 2 passes, which we're looking into. We're going to try a Toronto and a top down and a few other bits of kit and see where we go from there. But I'll buzz off now then, if you're late, Rose.
Thank you, Gary. Sorry, there's so much stricter are these timetables. Your licenses start chucking you out after so long. But certainly, without a doubt, there's all sorts been going on this last year, and I don't know about you, but I was really chuffed with the winter meetings, and learnt a lot without a doubt. So looking forward to next year. Also, really looking forward to coming and visiting the farm and having a good nosy round the pig shed there. So that's wonderful. Thank you very much. So I'll kick you off. Thank you. And I'd now like to don't disappear though. We'll have some questions for you later. Now I'd like to introduce Pip Robson, who is our new monitor farmer based up at Chathill, just the top side of Alnwick. Unfortunately started in the most bizarre of times. Bless his cotton socks, went out and bought a new laptop in preparation for these meetings. I'm fairly sure we'd all prefer to be actually nosying around your farm. But until then, without further ado, I'll pass you over to Pip, who's going to introduce himself and what happens at Chathill.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Yes, we farm up on the coastal plain, just to most of the grounds, mostly east of the A1 with a little bit west, on a thin parcel of land, which is quite nice land. We have a very mixed farm. We have different holdings with massive different soil types. So we have everything from solid clay to some reclaimed moorland, really. So it's a little challenging. It is a heavily mixed farm. You know, the livestock do play a major part in the whole operation, and I try to have an integrated system. It is, you know, the farm's generally farmed in a very traditional manner for this area. There's some of the land we have are in contract farming, share farming arrangements. So we have different rotations on different blocks of land. You know, whatever's necessary. We have a pedigree Angus, well, suckler herd, which is half pedigree Angus and half cross. Generally, the sort of Simmental Hereford cross Angus on the commercial side. On the pedigrees, we sell most of them privately, actually, so we don't push them. But in the past, we have had some success, as you can see from the bull who won the Highland Show in 2009. So obviously you don't do that very often in your life, so I reserve the right to keep using the photo. It's a spring calving herd which are indoor housed through the winter, so finishing lambs seems to suit the system well. You know, we've got quite a lot of old grass. We do have temporary grass in the rotation, so we, you know, have some grass where we can manage to finish lambs quite nicely. We do some stubble to stubble contracting, little general contracting. Try to keep it quite local. I don't want to be driving all around the countryside. And some of the stubble to stubble contracting is actually organic, so we have a vast range of all sorts to deal with, on that front, we also do some small civils drainage work for local farmers and what have we. We run a lorry. We used to run a lorry all the time. We run it at harvest time. We've kind of got used to chaser bins and what have we, and it suits the system. But tend to find a lorry makes a bit of money at harvest time, but it didn't lose money the rest of the year. It actually hemorrhaged money. So we still have an operator's license, what have we, but we just hire a unit for 3 to 4 months a year, depending, which works for ourselves and also works for Coastal Grains, our local co-op. And a bit of diversification. We do, you know, did a little bit trying to keep the business big, trading in straw. And a few years ago, we started a straw pelleting plant to try and add value to straw, because on some years you maybe don't make as much money as you'd like. So that's kind of an overview of the business. I don't know if we move to the next slide, Rose. Yeah, our main cash crop we grow is wheat. We grow Group 3 and 4 soft wheats, which are aimed for premium biscuit market, which although as Coastal Grains has a nice contract, which is quite lucrative. These wheats tend to suit our area. We can grow them pretty well. We can hit the targets you know, required to get our premiums. So we'll have that. Winter barley's generally feed varieties. Give up trying to grow malt and winter barley a while ago. We have oilseed rape, and I will carry on drilling. We grow it. Each parcel of land has its own rotation for one reason or another. I have no intentions of reducing my oilseed rape area whatsoever. And you know, other than last year being a terrible time because it was so wet to get things established, I still think it's the best break crop, and generally we have no problems growing it. We do grow spring pulses and peas and beans. You know, I try not to grow any second wheat, so we have quite a variation of break crops. We have spelt, which are ancient grain, which, you know, we grew a little bit of it. It's a bit of an experiment. We've been running for the last 3 years, and we'll keep going with that and see where we get to financially at the end of the day. I think, as John earlier said, it's hard in a few years to make a fair comment. You know, so I think, you know, 5 or 6 years down the line, we'll be able to say, well, it's worth growing or it's not worth growing. On some of the parcels of land, we do have potatoes grown by a third party, which we do from our contracting element of the farm help with. And they tend to be grown obviously on land that's suitable, but it's all seed. So they're early harvested potatoes, and therefore, you know, we don't have heavy equipment going in. I know last year was an exception, we'll leave it alone, but generally, you know, we're getting the potatoes off late August, early September, and therefore not, you know, I don't feel we're damaging the ground too much. And we have temporary grass on some of the holdings, which let's say my own rented and owned land in the rotation. And having that many break crops, it does allow us to keep off growing second wheats. And if you can keep your first wheats up, you know, it tends to be very profitable. Second wheats on our question. But you know, sometimes the second wheat after grass is as good as a first wheat, and obviously we have a lot of cattle, so the muck's getting spread back on the land. And in the past we have imported chicken manure, but it's quite. I find it quite expensive. I think you're probably better putting on some bagged stuff, and if trying to do so. We do use a lot of straw, so the way we put that back is in the form of muck. All our crops are stored and marketed by Coastal Grains, and have been all my grown-up life. My father, along with a lot of other local farmers, were founding members of Coastal Group together and built the grain store, which is now 110,000 tons or so of storage, and has approximately 100 members. It's also very close, so most of our land lies within 10 miles. So uplifted harvest is good, and we only now have temporary storage on farm, and a lot of the grains harvested straight from the combine into Chaser bin, into the lorry, and straight to Belford, and that's the end of it. And that works quite nicely. We'll move to the next slide, Rose. Equipment we have tend to be John Deere tractors. I've had them for quite all my life. I do have a little Massey Ferguson, which is actually older than me, which lives in the shed. We run New Holland combines. We run 2, but there's a little video you'll see later on. 3. Last year been such a horrendous year, and we do a lot of contracting. I decided to change a combine, but we hung on to the trade-in for harvest, so we actually managed to run 3 combines through harvest, which was a massive help. My cultivation equipment, we have all sorts, mainly because, I don't know what's happened there. We to cater for other people's needs, and from the contracting side of things, we need to cover most options, which allows me to have quite an armory of equipment, and I can use the different methods on the same farm. I haven't had to go down a road of going one way or another way, because I probably use my contracting income to pay for the equipment, and therefore can be used at home at a lower cost, which I think if we obviously, when we move going forward through this experience, as I'm a newcomer to it, and we have a machinery, somebody comes and checks it out, they're going to be horrified how many machines I have lying out in the yard. But we can do most things for most people when and where. We tend to drill with the Verdistat Rapide. We have a Kuhn 6-meter trail combination. We establish the Oilseed drape. I hope this isn't swearing too much at you, John, but with a trailed Sumo Trio with a mounted drill and liquid fertilizer applicator. We do plough some of the ground. I mean, a couple of years ago it was a lovely back end. We didn't plough much. This spring, ironically, we used the Sumo to do a tillage for the potatoes. There's only one field out of the ones that we were involved with, and that was 80 hectares wall trioed to establish them, and it seems to, that's what the chap wants, and seems to work quite nicely. And we have a Hitachi as a main excavator along with others. So I don't know, Rose, do you want to play one of these videos, or play some of the videos and we go talk through them? Oh, what's happening here? harvest, we end up with some quite nice dry conditions there. I don't know how much longer I'm meant to go on, Rose. Oh, I can't hear you. It's all quiet.
It doesn't look like you're muted, Rose. Sorry to jump in. So maybe try not use the headset. It might just be a problem with the microphone. Give something else a try.
Oh dear.
I'd say while Rose is doing that, then if that's fine, Pip, or Emily
Right,
might
okay,
take.
Yeah.
But I think
Okay.
if we can pass over
We'll
to
see it.
Emily
Yes,
in that case.
certainly.
I'm going to click through the slides.
Is Rose back? Are you there?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, I'm back. I'm just sorry. There was just one question. I think unfortunately, one or two things that you said through that video, Pip, we were sort of muting on and off, so we maybe missed one or two bits, I'm afraid. But just going back, I just wanted to ask regards the grain co-op. In that you obviously think it's worthwhile being a member of the grain co-op, but would it not be cheaper to dry and store your own grain?
I don't think so. People can buy space at Coastal Grains at £30 a tonne. I defy anybody to build a grain handling drying facility for £30 a tonne with the lab and the facilities we have there. That I think that's just not a chance. And we've in the past and up until people, you buy your storage there, and we've paid the money back within 10 to 12 years as they've given us a loan. So nobody that builds a shed gives you your money back in 12 years. But I shall leave that there.
Thank you. Yeah, without a doubt, we're all really looking forward to crossing our fingers and hopefully coming to look round soon. And I think Harry is going to have an absolute field day when he comes to do your machinery review. So thank you very much, Pip. Emily, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you. You look after the strategic farm programme, and I'm also hoping that this evening, and half the reason why I've asked you to join us is to talk about on-farm tryouts and what we can do without it being too difficult. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Rose. So just by way of introduction, my name's Emily Pope. I'm a Senior Knowledge Transfer Manager at AHDB. So I work in the cereals and oilseeds team, and as Rose has said already, primarily working with my colleague Fiona Gary, looking after the Strategic Cereal Farm programme. So you can see here from the map that you can see on your screen, similar to what Rose showed you earlier, we've got our network of monitor farms, and you've heard from 3 of our monitor farmers already this evening. And then we've got a network of strategic farms. So we've got farms within cereals and oilseeds, but we've also got farms across the other sectors that HDB works in. So you can see our locations of our strategic cereal farms here. We've got one in Scotland, and then we've got another one over near Stowmarket, and then a third one near Leamington Spa. So Rose, if you can just move on to the next slide. So these are our strategic cereal farm hosts, and if you're looking for some more information on the programme and all of the work that they're doing, then you can access that information on our website. You can see the various links there that you can go to for further information. I'll tell you a bit more about the strategic farm programme as we go through the presentation, but just by way of introduction, as so we've got our programme in 2017, Rob Fox, who started in 2018, and then most recently David Aglin at Balburney Home Farms up in Fife in Scotland, who started this summer. So Pip, he shares with you that surreal experience of launching in a digital format rather than being able to invite everyone around to look at the farm and the work that's going on. But really the kind of like the differences between the monitor farm programme and the strategic farm programme, you can see those listed here on the slide in front of you. And just to give you some context to that, the Monitor Farm programme is a 3-year programme. It's very much looking at the whole farm business. Both programmes really have that farmer-led, farmer-driven focus, but the strategic farm is different in a way that it really focuses in on the research and how we can test and demonstrate the research that AHDB funds in a commercial way. So a lot of the time research is done in a replicated small-scale plot trial experimental format, and that's necessary in order to understand the fundamentals of research and to get that rigorous testing done on on certain treatments, for example. But really what the strategic farm does is to take that research and test and demonstrate it in that commercial system. Everything that we do is subject to a full cost benefit analysis, so we use FarmBench to do that, and it really provides that structured testing and demonstration of research at a field or farm scale, not only to provide information obviously for our host farmers and for the wider industry, but also to facilitate a network of trials as well. So the idea is that everything that we do on the strategic farms, people, other farmers, other areas of the industry can learn from and try out things on their own farm. So I'll come on to how we try and encourage that later on in the presentation. But I just wanted to provide you with a short update of some of the work that we do on the strategic farms, just to give you a flavour of the types of trials that we're looking at. So Rose, if we move on to the next slide, please. The first year of all of our strategic farm programmes is what we call a baselining year. So for the Scottish strategic farm, that's obviously just starting. So their focus is going to be looking at baseline assessments, looking at crop performance and soil assessments for harvest 2021. And obviously the East and the West farms started a couple of years ago, so they had their baselining years, and now they've started introducing a series of trials across the rotation. So you can see here on the slide a number of different topics that we're looking at. Some of those topics we're looking at across multiple locations, so you can see that we've got some work around flowering strips and pests and natural enemies that is happening at both sites. And then there are certain trials that each of the farmers and the steering groups that support these programmes are interested in looking at. So it really offers that diversity of topics that we're looking at and across a geographical location as well. So to give you a flavour of one of the trials that we're looking at, if we move on to the next slide, please, Rose. This is one of the trials that we're looking at the Strategic Cereal Farm West, so hosted by Rob Fox near Leamington Spa. And it's probably one of my favourite trials. So I did a PhD at Harper Adams looking at the interaction of traffic and tillage on soil properties and crop yields. And this certainly wasn't the motivation for this trial. This was obviously from the farm host and the steering group. But it's looking at some similar things and based on some similar research. So this trial is a replicated tramline trial, and the background to this was really looking at the impact of different cultivation depths and the impact of those cultivation depths on soil structure, soil health and crop rooting, and then obviously finally looking at the yield in those different treatments as well. So that interaction between establishment, rooting and yield. So this is a long-term trial. It will continue for the duration of the project. For harvest 2019, it was established in 3 cultivation depths. So you can see the field map here on the right-hand side of the slide. And when we first started, we included those 3 treatments, the 5 centimetre, 15 centimetre and 30 centimetre cultivation depths. And then for harvest 2020, we added in an extra treatment looking at a direct drill system. So if we have a look at the next slide, you can see some of the results of the work that we've been doing at Rob's farm. And I think it was Gary earlier in their presentation mentioned about the soil health scorecard. So the scorecard is something that's being developed as part of an AHDB project, which is being run in collaboration with BBRO, and it's the Soil Biology and Soil Health Partnership. And part of that work is developing methodologies for farmers to test and monitor soil health on their own farms. And the soil health scorecard that you can see on this slide here is one of those parts of the project. And we're using it not only across our monitor farms, but also on some of our strategic farm trials here as well. So it's quite nice because it's quite intuitive. It basically looks at different soil parameters that we can measure and monitor. And looking at the literature, looking at the research, it allocates thresholds against those different parameters. So it can assign a traffic light system that you can see here. So the green colour indicates that no action is needed. The amber is something that you need to monitor, and the red indicates it's something that you need to investigate. So it's really nice because actually we're using this in a trial situation, but this is obviously something that you could do at a field scale, even if you weren't conducting a trial, but it would allow you to monitor the impact of your management strategies across the rotation. What you can also see here is some of the results from, sorry Rose, if we just skip back a slide, thank you, from the penetration resistance. So this is looking at linking what we've got in the scorecard in terms of soil health and soil biology to that soil structure. So you can see here, this was the results taken from Harvest 2019. And you can see here that we've got penetration resistance across the horizontal axes, and then we're looking down the soil profile in the vertical axes, so increasing depth as we move down that vertical axis. And you can see the 3 different cultivation treatments here, so 5 centimetre, 15 and 30 centimetre. And what you can see here is indicated by that pale blue line that sits on the right hand side of the graph, is that the 5 centimetre cultivation treatment significantly increased the penetration resistance in the top 10 centimetres of the soil. So it's something to think about when we're exploring those alternative cultivation and crop establishment systems, is that actually they can have an influence at different soil depths within the soil profile. And then when we look further down that soil profile, it changes, and you can see that actually the 30 centimetre depth recorded a higher penetration resistance at depth. And one of the aims of the work that we're doing with Rob on this trial is trying to increase that rooting capacity at depth. So we know that if we can increase the depth to which our roots grow and can access, then they're more likely to be able to withstand dry summers, for example, because they'll be able to access that deeper soil water, that soil moisture deep in the soil profile. So we just need to be mindful of how these different systems interact, not only with the soil structure, but what that means in terms of crop growth and root extension. So if we move on to the next slide, I know we've been talking about oilseed rape earlier on in the presentation. In the first year of the trial, we looked at the impact of those treatments on winter wheat, and then we were lucky enough to be able to have a look at those treatments and the impact on oilseed rape. And what you can see here in the picture, you can see quite clearly where those different treatments were laid out in the field. And what we found when we were looking at the plant establishment was that there was poorer plant establishment and fewer plants where there was the greater cultivation depth. So the 15 centimetre cultivation depths, you can actually see those plots as bare patches or patches of poor plant establishment in that picture there on the right hand side. And again, looking at that smaller picture, you can see that by November there was quite large differences in crop size. And we think that's likely due to weather conditions at drilling. So the 30 centimetre cultivation crop, you can just about see it there denoted on the left hand side of that smaller image. And then the direct drilling treatment, the crops were much better established, and there were more plants in those plots. So what we did with that, when we take a look at the next slide, we can have a look at the cabbage stem flea beetle pressure. Obviously, it's a very hot topic at the moment. We've just completed on a research project with ADAS, and we were lucky enough to work with ADAS on this project as well. But there's lots of different management strategies, and I think it's fair to say that there isn't a silver bullet for any of us, but it's looking at cultivation and crop establishment as part of that toolbox that we've got against cabbage stem flea beetle. But what we saw when we had a look at the adult pressure. So you can see here the graph on the left-hand side of the slide. This is, again, those different treatments along the horizontal axes. And then adult damage is represented as the percentage leaf area lost on the vertical axes on the left-hand side there. And what you can see is that there was greater adult damage in those cultivated treatments compared to the direct drill. And the mechanisms for this aren't 100% clear. It certainly doesn't mean that there was preferential feeding damage on those smaller plants in the cultivated plots, but it could be that those plants were growing so slowly that they couldn't actually get away and grow away from that adult damage. What we found then when we had a look at the larvae pressure, so in November and January we found similar trends, is that in the cultivated plots, so the bars on the right-hand side of the right-hand graph, you can see that where those cultivated plots were, there was lower larvae pressure. So it's possible that, there's a number of different reasons that could explain this. It's possible that the adults preferentially lay their eggs at the base of the larger plants. So that could, obviously that was in the direct drill and the more shallow cultivated treatments. Or it could be that those smaller plants that were found in those cultivated treatments can't support the number of larvae. But I think, and it's what the research has concluded as well, and it's fair to say, is that we still don't really have a grasp of that relationship between the number of larvae and the yield, and that relationship is poorly understood. And unfortunately for us, actually, when we looked at the field as a whole, Rob and the steering group and the team at AHDB took the decision that it was necessary. Actually, unfortunately, this trial went into spring beans, so we haven't been able to follow that through to yield, but you can see that those early season pressures were there, and the differences between the cultivation treatment. So it's an evolving picture. I think it's an interesting concept, in terms of looking at some of these things on your own farms, and being able to link it back to the research. So what's the research saying, but identifying management strategies that work on your own farm. So if we have a look at the next slide, you can see that we've got a range of trials that we're looking at for harvest 2021. This concept of managed lower inputs is something that's really popular on the strategic farms, and it's obviously something that a lot of people are thinking about in the industry. Obviously, cover crops features as well, how we can use cover crops to reduce nitrate leaching, how we can use flowering strips to boost pollinators and natural enemies. And we're also, looking from a strategic point of view about how we use the land available to us, and on farm, how we use it for environmental purposes compared to crop production, for example. So as I said, we've got the Scottish farm. They're going to be undertaking a rigorous process of baselining, looking at a range of parameters: soil biology and soil health, biodiversity, plant health, and they are going to have a look at a nutrition trial as well. And then at the west, as I say, we've got some similar trials to the east, those managed lower input trials, flower strips. We'll continue that cultivation trial. We're adding in an organic matter trial, and we're also exploring autumn blackgrass control and how we can use different cultivation strategies with and without glyphosate to achieve blackgrass control heading into the winter. So one of the things that Rose asked me to cover this evening is really, what you as an industry can get out of the strategic farm. And everything that we do on the strategic farm, we are really keen to see other people pick up some of the methodologies, some of the assessments that we're doing, and have a go and try it out on your own farm. So the next few slides that we're going to run through just now is a very, very quick overview. I realise that I'm short of time in terms of how to pick up some of these ideas and try them out on your own farm. So if we move on to the next slide, thank you. This is really just, the principles of on-farm trials and trials design. So we've got 4 key points here. First of all, it set the question. I think this is probably one of the hardest things to do because, I'm very lucky to work with so many farmers that are really engaged and enthusiastic to try lots of different things out. And actually, sometimes it's really difficult to pin down a specific thing, a specific question that we're trying to explore. And given the nature of on-farm trials, you really do have to pin it down to something quite specific, because you've already got a lot of variation in the environment in which you're operating in. Just in terms of the field, you've obviously got soil type variation, but weather, seasonal variation. So you want to try and minimise the variation in your trial design as much as you can. So one of the things I'd certainly encourage you to do is get in touch with the team at AHDB, either through Rose or contact me directly. And if you've got a specific question that you're thinking about investigating, obviously we're doing the work on the strategic farm. There might be other monitor farmers that have got the same kind of questions. And we work with a number of other organisations and initiatives. So some of you might have heard about Innovative Farmers. There's a series of field labs that run across the country. There could be something that you might be able to join up with and share the learnings and join a group of people trying out the same kind of thing. Not only setting the question, but I think setting like the boundaries in terms of what good looks like. So if you're comparing different treatments, what do you hope to achieve with it? There's obviously statistical analysis that you can do, and I'd certainly encourage trials to be laid out in a way which means you can generate robust data and concrete evidence from those trials. But I think it's also really important to ask yourself individually, what would good look like? And you know, if you're trying out a different tillage system to increase organic matter, what are your thresholds for success? Would you be happy with a 1% increase in 5 years, or are you trying to achieve a 5% increase, for example? So the next criteria is really choosing the most appropriate field and most appropriate site to locate your trials on. And again, trying to limit that background variation. So inherently, soil is varied across a field, and it's really difficult to minimise that influence of that variation. But I mean, it's quite simple. Just try and avoid a field that has previously been 3, because it's likely that you'll have had different management strategies in each of those fields, and that underlying variation is going to have an influence on the results that you get. Obviously, there's lots of data that you can use to help inform that decision. Soil assessment, soil maps. You could look at previous yield maps over the years. You could look at electrical conductivity. You could go out and do your own soil assessments to help inform that site selection. And then the third point, defining the treatments. You know, we've already covered this really. Aim for fewer treatments. It's better to try your farm standard against one new approach and replicate it, so repeat it 4 times across a field. You'll find out more about your new approach than you would if you had 4 new approaches that you were trying to trial against your farm standard. And then designing the layout is obviously really important. I'd certainly advocate keeping it extremely simple, because come harvest, you want it to be a really easy layout to manage in terms of getting that data. And at the end of the day, the yield data is really important to be able to link that back to cost of production and the impact of changing a management strategy. You need that yield data, so you need to be able to collect it in a way that's easy come crunch time, which seems to be approaching us rather quickly this year, I have to say. So if we have a look at the different types of trials, obviously on the strategic farms, everything that we do is a replicated tramline trial, or at least we try to complete replicated tramline trials. It really depends what you're trying to achieve. So if we have a look at the next slide, please, Rose. This highlights a couple of options that you might like to consider. So on the left-hand side, you've got something that we'd call screening trials. So this would be good if you were looking at different varieties and how they perform on your farm. So you can see here, you've got 10 different treatments, one of them being a control. So you've got 9 different varieties, for example, comparing it to your farm standard, which could be a control. And what you can see here is that your control, so the pale blue box on the left-hand side in that key, is repeated 4 times across that field. I think it is, if I can count it, yeah, 4 times across that field. And then you're comparing your new treatment, so your new varieties in this example, to that control. And really you want that replication of the control across the field, because that's your benchmark. And if you only had it once, it doesn't really provide you with enough data to compare how that variety performs, you know, across the field, taking into consideration that variation in underlying soil type, for example. And then what you can see on the right-hand side of your screen is what we refer to as half or quarter field trials. So you can see here, this is split field trials really. So we'd always encourage, if you were going to do something on a split field trial basis, is not to do it just in one field of your farm. So here you can see you've got 4 fields and you've got the same treatments replicated in all of those 4 fields. This is quite a nice one to do. So say if, you know, the 3 monitor farmers on the webinar tonight wanted to join up across a number of different sites, this could be quite a good design to compare how those treatments work on each of those different farms. And then I think the final technical slide from me tonight, if we move on to the next one, is about tramline trials. And these are probably the easiest ones in terms of laying them out and getting that data come harvest time. So what you can see on the left is a tramline trial. So as I said, keep it really simple. You've got your farm standard, your controlled treatment that's replicated the same number of times across a field that the treatment one, so your new treatment that you're trying to find out about, is replicated. Means you've got lots of data repeated across the field. You're not biasing it in any way, locating, you know, your treatment one at the best end of the field compared to the control, you know, at the lower performing end of the field, for example. You can then do all your harvests, compare the averages to each of those, you know, each of the different treatments, and that will provide you with a good, robust data set to make a decision on. The caveat to that is if you've got anything in the field that could have a real influence on the data that you're collecting here. So you can see on the right-hand side of this slide, if you've got a slope in the field, you can group your treatments. So basically you use something called blocks, but it's, you know, it's terminology. Basically what you want is all of the treatments in block 1 that you can see there are exposed to the same conditions as each other. And then all of the treatments at the opposite end of the scale, so at the bottom of the hill, for example, here in block 5, all of those treatments are exposed to those same conditions. So it just allows you to interrogate that data in a more effective way, taking account of the influence of that slope. And what we're doing at AHDB, we've been working on it for some time now in kind of like in support of the strategic farm work that we're doing, is developing some online tools to be able to do this. So, you know, you can use Excel spreadsheets to do some of this analysis, and we'll be providing guidance to allow you to do that. So watch this space, it's on its way. And it's certainly something, if you get in touch with us directly, I think my email address is on the final slide. If you've got any questions, then please get in touch and we're more than happy to help. So thank you, Rose. I'll hand back over.
We're back on. Emily, thank you very much indeed. That has been really quite insightful, but without, we all need to sit down and have a look at our aims and objectives as to what we want to get out of this. So just conscious of time, I'm going to wrap up with a question each, but 5-second answers, please, if that's all right. So if you could all switch your video cameras back on if you haven't yet. I've lost my mouse and I can't see whether you have. That's him, you're all there, wonderful. Nobody's disappeared or got drunk and slid under the table. John, just regards your drilling and varieties, really, sort of a 2-part question actually, but when you say drilling early, how early is early, and how does that compare with the other farmers around you? And do you notice any weed or disease differences with your wider drilling rows?
We get on as, by the time we're finished drilling oilseed rape, which hopefully is, if we get on in decent time, towards the last few days in August, and if we can, we're straight into wheats after that and get the wheats in. Drill all, mostly first wheat, very rarely do we have the odd field of second wheat. We do at the moment because we're changing rotation from 3 to 5 years, so just thought we'd get into the sync of that. We're using varieties that will drill early, Revelations being one. Evolution's another. Spotlight we drilled early, not Spotlight, Skyscraper this year. It looks great. But you've got to bear in mind that we're about up to 700 feet high here. So what would be classed as early on lower land, but earlier ground, we can get away with that week or so earlier than they might think is early, really. And we start drilling with seed rates, and people will raise their eyes at 375 seeds per square meter as well. We really want a good establishment of seed in the ground and get those roots down, because when you're this high off the North Sea, when those winds come in, they can just literally knock a crop to bits, really. Sorry, what was the other part of the question, Rose?
I think that was it, wasn't it? How early is early? Oh, no.
Oh, disease pressure.
Weeds and diseases with you, wider rows.
Well, as I say, we've been doing it 3 years. It's probably hardly long enough to come to a firm conclusion on that. But I wouldn't say that either the weed pressure is any greater than we find anywhere else, or indeed that the disease pressure is either.
Brilliant.
But I think it is key that you do select your varieties carefully.
Yeah.
That's what I would say there.
And Gary, just bearing in mind all that you mentioned that's happened over the last year, do you get more cows? Don't you get more cows? You've built a pig shed and have an awful lot of muck. Is there anything you're thinking about how we can look at that this winter and explore it further?
I think, yeah, I guess you've got to look at costs, whether it's worth having the extra man there. Certainly for our situation, I mean, Alex getting to the latter years of work, to put it politely. So yeah, I'd like to, yeah, the pig man isn't solely with the pigs, for one. He does help with the tractoring. I'd taken over more Alex role. Harvest this time out, I think. He hasn't clarified completely yet, but yeah, certainly costs of everything. You know, if you can still get it cheaper out of a bag and it's doing as good a job, then yeah, we've wasted some money. But I like to think the pigs are bringing in a regular income that should support the arable side a bit better, as well as the improvements on the soil. So yeah, we can tie anything in. I'm open to options and people's suggestions for meetings. To get people around discussing, I'm all for it.
Well, if anybody does, you know, by all means get in touch, and we can have a look at it. And Pip, 2 questions. One's a very quick question, but how many men do you have on the farm working with you?
It depends. We have sort of 5 full-time staff, and we do have seasonal staff. We can get up to 8. There's one of the farmers who we contract farm helps us at harvest time and in the spring. So, you know, and we have some casuals now and again. So it does vary depending what's going on, you know.
And then lastly, having listened to tonight's webinar and had a sticky start to the Monitor Farm programme, but you're not the only one. Have you had any thoughts about what you would like to look at this winter and what you'd like to do, or on-farm tryout?
Oh, hey, it's listening to the other guys. I think I should have an hour and a half conversation with John. I'm sure you give me a lot of good pointers going forward. Things, you know, something that I would like, we spoke about before, is I would like to look into carbon, and and let's have some real facts and figures about carbon throughout the industry, and I think that's one of the things I'd like to major on.
Yeah, definitely a subject that keeps coming up at the minute. So right, I just want to point out at this moment to everybody the resources that are available on the AHDB website. The harvest toolkit is there, but please go and have a look at them, use them. It's there for you all, and it wants utilising without a doubt. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to visit the trials, but the selection tools and the recommended list is still available. If there's anything that you can't find and you want, you know, don't hesitate to get in touch, and I'll point you all in the right direction. So just to close this meeting for tonight then, there'll be a survey that follows this webinar when it closes down. Please do give us your feedback. As always, it's very much appreciated. And I think without a doubt this digital platform is going to be with us for some time yet. Just to reiterate again that this webinar is being recorded, so if you've missed any of it, please have a look on the AHDB YouTube. And like I say, any further questions or thoughts, don't hesitate to get in touch. The next webinar is on the 5th of August. The link for this should go into the chat box on the right hand side. Nutrient management for harvest 2021 calculations and considerations. So I hope you can all join us for that one too. But Pip, Gary, John, Emily and Christian in the background, it's been really great to catch up with you tonight. Pat on the back, you know, new skills to write on your CV without a doubt. Throw it the digital webinar. Thank you all so much for joining us. Yeah, it's been really fab to see you, and fingers all crossed we can get on farm this November and come and have a walk around and see you properly and see what's been going on. So without further ado, I'll close it there. Thank you all very much. Look forward to seeing you soon. Cheers.
Good night.
Good night.